You're listening to the Educated Cowgirl Podcast, episode 24. Hey cowgirls and cowboys. So whenever I'm thinking about new episode ideas or new guests to invite on the show, I'm always thinking about what value could this bring to not only my audience, but to the equine industry as a whole. And I think that's so important to consider. I recently heard Dale Brisby actually talk about the value he brings to his audience on the Converse Cowboy podcast, and I loved what he had to say about it so much. And with that in mind, I feel proud of the value today's episode can bring, as I am sharing such a fascinating conversation with a lady who has such passion for the horse industry, the value of education, and making things better for the horse. Alyssa Logan is the assistant professor at Middle Tennessee State University. She may be young, but the knowledge she has gained and research she has accomplished in this industry is so amazing. As a horse show judge, judging coach, teacher, and so much more. We discuss so many great topics that impact the horse and the industry, from how the findings from her research projects have given us great insights into improving horses' health and their performance, sportsmanship today in the industry, and the importance of continuing education, whether for academic or practical reasons. I believe this is such an important episode for the equine industry through the wide range of topics that Alyssa and I discuss, and is one of the conversations we need to be having on how we can improve and promote the industry for the benefit of the horse and the public. I learned so much from this episode, and I know you will definitely learn something too. You will want to share this episode with all of your friends and family, and I hope it sparks your own conversations. Hey, and welcome to the Educated Cowgirl Podcast, hosted by yours truly. My name is Abby Carpenter, and I am a cowgirl and equestrian through and through. I started this podcast wanting to make more of an impact in the equine industry. That's why I am making it my mission to help promote the industry to the public through sharing my love for horses through education and bringing other experts and professionals onto the podcast with me to discuss important topics that impact the horse community. So whether you are a crazy horse lady like me, want to learn more about horses, or want to learn more about the industry, you've come to the right place. On this podcast, we will be talking about ownership, horsemanship, fitness, faith, breeds, and so much more. We believe that it doesn't matter what type of saddle you ride in or the breed of horse you may ride. We all contribute to this community to make it great, and that there is always something to learn from the back of your horse. So grab a coffee and get ready to take some notes, and let's get started. This is the Educated Cowgirl Podcast. All right, so welcome back to the podcast, everyone. I am so excited about the lady I am talking with today, as she, to me, truly is the definition of an educated cowgirl, from the degrees she holds and more. Thank you again for agreeing to take the time out of your busy summer schedule to talk with me today. Would you please go ahead and introduce yourself to the listeners, what you do, and a fun fact about yourself?
Absolutely. Thanks for having me, Abby. I am Alyssa Logan. I am an assistant professor and the horse judging team coach at Middle Tennessee State University. We're located in Murfreesboro, Tennessee, just south of Nashville, a pretty great location in terms of the horse industry.
Oh, I'm sure.
So at Middle Tennessee, I get to wear a lot of different hats, which is pretty fun. So I mentioned I coach the judging team, but within my assistant professor role, I have a teaching obligation, a research obligation, and then I advise and coordinate the students in our master's programs. I'm the graduate student coordinator. I also judge with being a judging team coach. So this past year, I obtained my NRHA judging card, which I cannot speak highly enough about that process. Their education is incredible. With the applicant seminar and the judges school, it was an honor to go there and to get to work with all those judges. And then I also got my AQHA level 1 card, which again was a really, really cool and accessible process to be able to kind of start with that part of becoming an AQHA and breed show judge. You asked for a fun fact, so I'll
Yes.
try and do something non-horsey. It's not often that we're not doing horse things, but I love to go to national and state parks and hike when I get a chance to.
Fun, very fun. Hiking is something I enjoy to do as well. Great. All right. So I know from your conversation with Jen and Liz on the Rail podcast that you were one of those horse crazy kids that didn't come from a horse family, which I love learning from those people as someone who was born in a horse family. So growing up, was there ever a time when your parents saw that you were getting more serious about horses, and were they ever concerned for you would be able to succeed, or did they ever fear you failing?
It is such a good question. From the advising standpoint, when I chat with students that are, in high school or in college, that certainly is a question that comes up. Because ultimately the reason that we have college programs is for students to have careers and help them get those careers, or that we have internships and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
So, certainly my family was not horse related at all. And I think probably the time I was, 11 or 12, kind of those early teenage years, it became evident that the horse thing was not just a hobby that I did, it wasn't just I want to take weekly lessons, but
Mm-hmm.
at that age I was very much expressing I have interest in owning a horse. I'd like to show a horse. I'd like to learn about the process of training and managing and caring horses. And very early on, my career goals were actually to become a veterinarian.
Mm-hmm.
That was something that was very accessible in the area, right? We hear about veterinarians, we interact with veterinarians quite a bit. And as I got further along in my education, I realized that my career goal was, okay, I want to be a veterinarian and I want to do sports medicine research. That
Mm-hmm.
was kind of the main goal was getting to research. And I learned that grad school and doing kind of the master's and the PhD was actually the process that aligned best with my goals. So my career really never changed, but the process through advisement through other folks that kind of got honed in when I was later in high school and in college. But there certainly was a point when I was in middle school and expressing that this is a career that I'm interested in,
Mm-hmm.
um, that my parents really kind of discussed in many different ways that in order to get whatever career it is that you want, there is education that is necessary. And I'm really thankful for my parents.
Mm-hmm.
Had I come and said, my goal is to be a farrier, they would have said, okay, you need to be looking into farrier schools.
Mm-hmm.
And so my goal with being kind of in the academic side of it was, okay, you need to look into these programs and you need to find what that fit is for you and kind of focus on your career goals and then kind of backwards design it and look at what programs support your career goals.
Mm-hmm.
And I have to say, looking back, as a teenager, you don't really realize those things as much when you are young.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but my parents kind of had the standard that if I wanted it, I needed to be the one that put in the time. So I needed to
Mm-hmm.
be the one that reached out to the coaches that I wanted to meet and that reached out to, the professors and the programs and scheduled the tours so that they knew me as an individual and they knew my name and got to know me. Rather than, the coaches getting to know my parents, they really got
Right.
to know me as the rider or, a trainer that I wanted to work with or something. So, um, I'm very grateful that from early on they said, instead of saying we're not horse people, you can't do this, they said, whatever topic that is, we encourage you that you need to get an education.
Mm-hmm.
And for me, that looked like the academic track. And I can't speak highly enough of that, of whatever that career is, whether it's a trade school, whether it's doing an assistantship or an apprenticeship, that time to learn from someone and to get the guidance and kind of to get the skills and the techniques is so important. And you deserve that time. Like you
Yeah.
deserve to have that learning time. No one expects you to be an expert in an industry right away at all.
No, 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 no. And I love that when you said that your parents they gave you the support to like pursue this, but they're also like, okay, if you want to do this, you got to do it. And I think that's so great that they kind of and raised you to have that confidence to go to ask people for like, hey, I want to do this. Will you teach me? Or find schools that fit what you wanted, which I think is so important. So, with your education background, with academics and or as a trainer, you really do have an all-around knowledge that I believe really serves not only you as a professor, but also the industry. Would you be able to dive more into the degrees you have and what and you touched on it, but what was really the deciding factor for you to pursue more of an educational path instead of going further as a trainer?
Absolutely. So for me, actually, the desire for the academic career came first. I'm not kind
Hmm.
of talk through this story, but towards the end of my academic career came kind of the acknowledgement and plan of adding some of the professional training part of it as well.
Hmm.
So I have 3 degrees. I have a bachelor's of science, a master's of science, and a PhD. And all 3 of those are in animal science.
Hmm.
I actually have, not many people know this, maybe this should be a nice fun fact, but I actually have a minor in Spanish, which just came from some high school credits that
I mean, it's
transferred from that
helpful in
one.
this industry,
Yeah,
so
yeah. And it was great communication skills,
yeah,
truly.
yes.
If you can get in front of people and talk in a different language, that really teaches you a lot. So I really commend
Yeah.
that part of my education too. So all of my 3 degrees are in animal science. Here at Middle Tennessee, we actually have a Bachelor of Science and a Master of Science in horse science,
Hmm.
which that's pretty unique. There's not a lot of programs that it is just in horse science. So it's not odd if you go to a university that some of your horse science or your dairy science, your poultry science professors, it's not odd that their degrees are not in a specific species. An
Hmm.
animal science degree is pretty common
Yeah.
for graduate programs. And then in graduate school, sometimes this comes as a relief to some students. You don't take as many classes as what you did in undergrad. So in
Hmm.
undergrad, you might have, a 17, 18, 19 credit load as a full-time student. And thinking back into undergrad, you're doing that, you're trying to be in a club, you're trying to have a job, some semblance of a social life, and maybe,
Yeah.
cook with your family and give proof of life every so often.
Yeah.
But in grad school, it's typical that like 6 to 9 credits is a full credit load. So already you're at half of that. Some of your credits, you're actually getting credits for your research, or for doing an experiential learning project, or it might be, you have to go to a stats class or a nutrition class, or like I just created a new graduate judging class that's kind of cool. So there is some class time, and a lot of it is discussion based. So my master's and PhD, I had courses that were specific to my course of study. My
Hmm.
course of study, I did my master's and PhD at Michigan State University, and I studied under Dr. Brian Nielsen, and his specialty is equine exercise physiology, and that's the reason that I went there for my grad school. It's typical for grad school that you go to a program not necessarily to say, I want to go to Michigan State. I want to be a Spartan, go green, go white, which I enjoyed being a Spartan, but I wanted to go to study under this individual
Hmm.
that specialized in young horse research, in bone, in some joint, in kind of overall performance horse and racing horse things, and that was my priority. So the courses that I took, and there weren't even a lot of courses that I took, but the courses that I took were based kind of towards that equine exercise physiology. I had to take a lot of biochem. I had to take some kinesiology courses. There were a lot of pathways and mechanisms I had to learn about. I had to do a decent amount of stats to learn about study design, some communication and teaching courses as well. And then a lot of grad school experiences kind of look like school of life type of things, like
Hmm.
being asked to contribute to some things in the community. And in my grad school career, and I think I'm very thankful that it also aligned with the current career that I have at Middle Tennessee, it was often asked to do things in the industry.
Hmm.
Like a small example is at Michigan State, they hosted the Michigan Equine Expo, which is a pretty large expo in the Midwest.
Hmm.
And most years I had something that I was doing. Maybe it was moderating or just being around that week. I got roped into riding draft horses, riding standard bred horses to
Yeah.
prep for courses. getting to do a lot of youth involvement. And early on in my master's, that was, maybe assisting the person that was running it,
Mm-hmm.
to later in my PhD, actually being able to be the individual that gave some talks or worked directly with youth, and that kind of develops into preparing for being a professor. So
Mm-hmm.
a lot of those experiences, even though, my degrees, as I said, were in animal science, were related to this equine career. And I had cohorts. There were about 40 of us that did that were together in it was called the Animal Science Graduate Student Association, Michigan State. And we had cohorts that were in poultry science and in dairy science, doing nutrition and reproduction. And we all kind of were colleagues, but we all
Mm-hmm.
had different advisors that we reported to in different projects. But then it was really cool to have other animal scientists around to say, hey, I'm a little confused on this stats process. It seems like you've done something similar. Can I work with you? Um, so that's kind of a long-winded explanation of what my degrees are. I think maybe
Mm-hmm.
we'll talk a little bit on some of the studies in a bit. And then so I started my master's in 2017, and I finished my PhD in 2022. So in that time, right, there was this little COVID thing that happened,
Yeah.
and things were different. And I
Mm-hmm.
have to say the horse industry was something that adapted and found ways to get youth and amateurs and more open exhibitors involved. And so in the height of 2020, my whole work schedule kind of changed a bit. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
we were told, you have to work from home. We were actually at a farm doing a sheep model research study. I think we were one of the last studies on campus, and we were kind of, getting samples taken care of, getting animals taken care of, and then running home because we were told that campus was shutting down.
Oh yeah.
And yeah, that was crazy. Um, and I had already had a schedule where like I could work from home here and there. I had a yearling that I had acquired in grad school, and that was kind of my first horse that I broke out, and it allowed me to show him and work with him. And I knew that following grad school, I wanted to stay in academics
Mm-hmm.
and become a professor. I didn't necessarily know where, because that kind of depends on what positions are open, but I knew that it was important to me to be involved in industry.
Mm-hmm.
I felt like I was going to be very disappointed in myself and where I came from if I became someone who said, I'm an equine scientist, and I stayed in the lab and I just kind of stayed with my research.
Mm-hmm.
Industry involvement and youth involvement and student involvement and being able to coach and work with horses is so important to me. It's why I did this career. And I didn't want to miss out on that.
Right.
So I knew and I felt, and with talking with some folks, that I didn't want to get to the point where I finished my PhD and then say, okay, now I have my PhD. Now I'm going to go ahead and, turn in my amateur status so I can begin coaching. I felt that I wanted, again, the opportunity to learn from folks while I was still in grad school, to also kind of have that education of becoming a better horseman
Mm-hmm.
and becoming a better judge. So I had previously boarded my horse at Dustin Beamer's location, and he hosts DMB Performance Horses in Mason, Michigan. And
Mm-hmm.
I still had a very close contact with him, and him and I kind of talked over the phone, and he gave me some incredible advice that, I was kind of saying, I don't know if I should give up my amateur status. I'm not, it's not like I'm a colt breaker, and it's
Mm-hmm.
not like I've been a world champion. I hadn't even shown at a world show at that point in my
Mm-hmm.
life. And
Mm-hmm.
he really said to me, you don't have to be a top 1% rider to go ahead and do that journey and become an apprentice and go further in the judging. And that was the best advice that I've had on that topic. So he took me in as his apprentice and gave me some amazing opportunities to learn about effective coaching, to learn more as a horseman. I
Mm-hmm.
hadn't done a lot on all-around horses, and he put me on more all-around horses, and I felt that I learned a lot more about the ranch and the reining because of that education with him,
Mm-hmm.
and helped me to find more opportunities to judge and prepare, that when I applied for positions in 2022, I felt that I was able to be a little bit more marketable individual. And while I had some of the publications and the teaching side of it, I really wanted to share that I wanted to stay connected to the industry. And I'm very thankful that all of those things aligned and this position came up. And now I'm at Middle Tennessee State University, and really enjoying it here.
Yeah, no, I love all of that. There's so much, and I love that you went into detail about what it's like to go through master's program or go through compared to undergrad, because I think a lot of young people when they're graduating high school, they're considering like, well, I want to work with horses, but I think a lot of them are like, well, I only really need school if I'm going to be a vet or if I'm going to do some kind of scientific thing or some big high powered thing. But I, and they don't always think that, oh, I'm just going to work with horses and I don't really need the education side of it. But that really is another part of it. Because, like you said, with the master's program, you get the education side and you get the practical experience. And so I
Absolutely.
think that's so important. Yeah.
Yeah, we really pride ourselves in having practical, well-rounded students. Actually, our graduate students, to earn their assistantships, they have weekly barn shifts that they do if they're on a teaching assistantship, because
Mm-hmm.
we feel that it's important that they're horsemen. And it's hard work. I mean, it's
Mm-hmm.
hot, you're out there doing stalls. But to be able to be a scientist, an educator, and a
Mm-hmm.
horseman, is pretty incredible to walk out of your master's with that experience.
Yeah, yeah. And just like you said, the industry involvement with you can't just be a scientist in the lab because your research projects are going to stay in the lab unless you get that outside experience and actually physically touch the horses and or touch the animals or whatever it is. Like you
Yep.
can't just be one thing.
It's really important too, you don't have to be a professional horse trainer to go do a master's.
Yes.
You don't really even have to ride if you don't want to. That's okay.
Yeah.
Those are separate skills. But to have a finger on the pulse of the industry and understand what the industry is asking for. Like, I don't own racehorses. I've never entered a horse in a race. I've been to a
Hmm.
few horse races, mostly standard bred races,
Hmm.
but I follow along what the racing industry is, and I get notifications from Blood Horse and the Pollock Report because it's important to know what the industry that I'm studying and am a professional
Hmm.
and just to stay current because I like the horses
Yeah.
still, and to know what they're asking for, and maybe there's new ideas that I hadn't thought of coming from them too.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
Sorry.
No, you're good. Exactly. So something else that I was also impressed by you is, and I've told you this, is your passion for your research projects, specifically in equine physiology and joint and bone health. Uh, from working with different ages of the horses, how nutrition affects their physical health, and so many more innovative insights. What has been the most rewarding part of these findings, and what would your ultimate goal be with everything you've published and found?
Ooh, that's a big question.
Yeah,
Um,
you can break it down if you need to.
okay. Man, you are so thoughtful. That's a great question. I think the exciting thing, the most rewarding part for me is the horse.
Hmm.
I'm in this job because I love the horse and because I love students and being able to put those two things together. So, having findings in research, whatever project it is, that are applicable to industry, that the average horse owner can implement, and if we put together a popular press article, can understand and have a connection with,
Hmm.
and then things that can improve the experiences for horses and make horse training more effective and, improve welfare. Those are the big things for me. Sometimes there are some things that are like, that number is cool and that method is cool and they add to a greater story. But the things that get me out of bed in the morning and, make you kind of want to jump up and down are the results that are like, yes, this will help horses and horse owners. That's the big thing for me. So I just kind of in a small bite, my first project in my master's, we used calves as a model for growing horses because it was an applicable bone model that we had access to. We could get some bone data on that we couldn't on yearling horses, and large numbers were accessible. Finding large horse numbers in equine studies can be tough sometimes. And we found that we put all of these calves in stalls very similar to what yearling sale prep looks like. And we allowed these animals, we only interacted with them for 6 weeks of their life, a month and a half. That's a pretty small
Mhm.
amount of time.
Mhm.
And we found that allowing them to have a short sprint down a concrete aisleway that was 71 meters long, and we allowed them to do that short sprint either 1, 3, or 5 days per week. And 5 days per week, that's Monday through Friday. That's every
Mhm.
day of your week. But one day per week, that's a little bit more applicable and bite-sized when you've
Mhm.
got a herd of 100 yearlings that you're working with.
Mhm.
And we found however many days it was, whether it was 1, 3, or 5, across the board, they had about a 25% increase to bone strength in what would be their cannon bone. And that was super cool to see, one day a week, just let them, run down the barn aisleway, which even better, you could let them out into pasture.
Mhm.
That they have that much increase to bone strength entering at that point we were kind of modeling race training or sal prepping, whatever that is, allowing them some time to have some dynamic exercise and allow bone to respond to that and set the animal up for a more successful career. But it required so little work from the handler. That was so cool, such an exciting thing. So things that prioritize the horse, but then make it appropriate and applicable to do for, the manager, the owner, the trainer. That's just the greatest mix possible. That's what makes me really excited.
Oh, I love that. And I love seeing the smile on your face as you talk about that. That's so great. Um, so what do you hope this does for the equine industry?
So equine science as a whole, like most of the research that I'm a part of has to do with exercise physiology. There's some nutrition things, animal welfare. But there's also other sectors like genetics and reproduction that I'm not trained in those topics, but there's many
Mhm.
other individuals that are, and I know you've had other individuals that you've interviewed on here. So hopefully equine science as a whole improves the health of horses and improves the career of horses. Makes riding and training efficient and effective and also fun too. That's why we're part of
Mhm.
this. And even better yet, increases the involvement to industry.
Mhm.
Getting more people involved in horses and making it accessible. It's silly to think about that from the science side of it, but if we
Yeah.
have training methods that make sense based on how horses' bodies kind of respond from the mental training part of it, but also the physical training part of it,
Mhm.
that makes the horse industry more acceptable to public perceptions
Mhm.
and makes individuals want to get more involved in our industry. So the overall answer is it benefits the horse
Mhm.
and it makes people want to stay in our industry and come to our industry.
Oh, I love that. That's so good. So something I just thought of with your research projects, when you were talking about the research project with the young calves and then translating that to young horses, something that a lot of people talk about is like with the futurity horses, like with reining and with barrel horses or whatever futurity horses, there are a lot of people that are like, oh, I would never train my horse at 2 or 3 to do this, to do this. It's just so hard on them. They're still growing. Have you what with this research, what have you found with in terms to how people can relate that to those futurity horses and training?
Absolutely. This is a question that I get a lot. And we talked about some of our classes and
Mhm.
was actually part of my PhD comps because that is kind of one of the popular press and popular opinion part of
Mhm.
things. So people and horses, right? We both have bones.
Yeah.
And kind of to think about this for ourselves. When you are young and in elementary school and high school, you're often involved in sports, right?
Right. Yeah.
There's PE in school, or you might get involved in soccer or track or just, tussling around and being kids. And we want to allow that. That's beneficial to bone strength. What's going to happen is bone actually responds to the loads placed on it or a lack of loads placed on it. That's something known as Wolff's Law. And so if bone does not have dynamic strain placed on it, bone maintains a lot of the calcium in our body.
Mhm.
And there's this thing called the mechanostat theory. It's this negative feedback loop, kind of like working with a thermostat. And if bone is not getting high strain dynamic loads put on it by running and jumping around as kids or colts, bucking around and farting around in the
Yeah.
pasture, bone says, you know what? Apparently I'm not really needed here. and we can go ahead and get rid of some of this mineral. I am
Mhm.
extra weight. I am extra energy to hold on to. I'm just not needed here. Okay, and that happens. And then when that horse gets pulled in off of pasture and begins its race training and it's
Mhm.
been kept in its stall, the bone says, I haven't been running around in pasture, so I'm going to go ahead and lighten up the load here. And then
Mhm.
that horse begins sprinting in race training or doing some high strain things in roping or whatever type of discipline it
Mhm.
is. And that's when injuries could come up because the bone has been told it's not really needed.
Yeah.
But when we allow horses to do some high strain activities, like being able to freely exercise out in the pasture and run and buck, or early on in race training, actually allowing, at a small amount, we kind of don't want to mentally overstrain them, but
Mhm.
allowing some quicker, shorter, high speed work to tell bone, just so you are still needed here,
Mhm.
because bone is going to respond to the strain placed on it. So if there's an increased load placed on it, bone's going to say, okay, we're going to go through this process. And part of that process with increasing bone strength is bone's actually going to take away some of the weaker bone and lay down some stronger bone. So there's a process called bone modeling, and that happens when you're young, right? Um, I like to use a road construction model because I grew up in Michigan. And I don't think I've ever seen I-75 or I-69 not under construction. So bone modeling is when you build a road. When you build a road, you have the opportunity to build a large 6-lane highway with lots of entrance and exit ramps, where bone remodeling is kind of that road maintenance, where you're filling in some potholes. So all through our lives, we can do bone remodeling. Our body can kind of, fix up bone and take care of it.
Mhm.
But bone remodeling, when a horse is young or a human is young, and we're laying down that road for the first time,
Mhm.
is that opportunity to ask ourselves, do you want that strong, well-adapted 6-lane highway? Or would you like that single dirt country road that's going to need to be refilled often and might not make it?
Right.
Um, so by permitting exercise when an animal is young, we give them that opportunity to lay down that strong road. Now, what gets tough about training and also showing animals or racing animals when they're young is when we train by a calendar and
Okay.
say there is this event, whatever it is. It's a futurity, it's a stakes race, and we say we need to have this horse be at this top shape by this race or by this event.
Mhm.
Many horses will be ready and have no problem, and they're ready to go. And it is an absolute pleasure to watch those animals that are naturally cadenced and naturally skilled or naturally have speed and are confident.
Mhm.
But then there may be some animals that, whether it's for a physical reason, maybe there's an injury or some overtraining or a
Mhm.
soreness, or a mental reason that they're just not holding up to the stress or
Mhm.
need some more time to settle in at shows and races, there might be horses that are not ready for that event.
Mhm.
And the hard thing as a professional or even as a DIY amateur or
Mhm.
an owner is to recognize that that horse may not be ready
Mhm.
and there's something else out there for that horse. So recognizing the horses that aren't going to make it to that calendar event for whatever reason doesn't mean their career is over. It just might
Mhm.
mean that there's a different event that's a match for them. But we need to recognize, as kind of the voice and the cares for our horse, that if we are choosing, to ride and train our horses at any age, whether it's young or older,
Mhm.
that we need to design our show season or our racing season around what works for the horse
Mhm.
versus, training by a calendar and that horse going to that event regardless. And pain is there for a reason. This is definitely a tricky and tough conversation that we have in kind of an ethics conversation in some of the grad and undergrad classes.
Yeah.
And we have pain for a reason, right?
Mhm. Mhm.
If you twist an ankle, your body kind of says that hurts. We probably shouldn't keep running.
Yeah. Yeah.
And oftentimes a part of a lot of injury recovery, if you've had a sports injury, is some rest.
Mm-hmm.
There might be some anti-inflammatories and some ice and often rest.
Mm-hmm.
Well, the processes of healing for an injury aren't too different with horses, except they have four legs.
Yeah.
And oftentimes a very crucial part of recovery, and in some points, the most important part of recovery is rest
Mm-hmm.
and allowing that to happen if it is needed. When we get to a point of masking pain, whether it's kind of temporary or long term, we need to acknowledge that masking pain hasn't really cured the injury. It has only kind of ameliorated some of these symptoms. And so we need to, acknowledge what it is if that animal is medicated in some sort of way and understand, that that animal has bute or, something else so that they can
Mm-hmm.
be comfortable when they're in the stall and to take out some of the inflammation.
Mm-hmm.
So there's kind of a lot of things
Yeah.
coming together, but training young animals as a whole is actually a very beneficial process.
Yeah.
And even permitting them to have some free exercise and allowing them to have pasture interactions. It's great on the social side of it, the nutrition side of it, getting out
Yeah.
on pasture, and it'll actually save you money on your feed bill.
Yeah.
But also from the bone part of it. But what we do have to acknowledge, whatever age it is, it's not just those futurity horses, it's any age, even the older horses, that um, we shouldn't ask them to make their health fit into our calendar. And it's hard. I
Mm-hmm.
am very lucky that my paycheck at the end of the day does not rely on me showing a horse.
Right.
Whether I show my horses or not is often my choice. Or even if I've been at a place where I am working horses for somebody else, my family eating dinner does not rely on me showing that horse.
Yeah.
So being able to recognize that there are many individuals that their entire livelihood does base on horse performance. And there are so many people in the industry that do an incredible job of recognizing that as a professional, taking care of the horse in the long term is actually what ends up being more beneficial for that entire relationship.
Mm-hmm.
And just acknowledging what the purpose of the event is and
Yeah.
where the horse is and making sure that things match for them is important.
Yeah. No, I love that you added that in because I think there are trainers who obviously they that is their job to show these horses, and if if their entire next 6 months of keeping the lights on depends on one 3-year old at the futurity, at the reigning futurity, they might need to take a step back and be like, am I being safe here or am I being like just trying to get money out of this horse and kind of think about the horse and kind of take that into account, which I like.
I am so impressed with there are many trainers at the highest level, and
Mm-hmm.
then also seeing apprentices learn that relationship with the horse
Mm-hmm.
and that balance. It is very impressive to see, and I love it when folks go and tell the honest story. There have been many kind of recently that have said, we're holding this one off from the futurity this year, but we
Yeah.
can't wait to see it in the Derby, and then it comes back. It's like, whoa,
Yeah.
that horse was stronger. Seeing that in racing too. So I think that the industry is in a really cool place of having these conversations. And I have been very impressed with some professionals in how they have shared their stories and what they're doing with their horses.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. I love that. So with the industry, another topic that I would love to talk about is how being educated or continuing education, and we've talked about it, can help us to promote and grow the industry in both logical and creative ways and help change it for the better. As you work with students daily and are heavily involved in the industry as a judge and competitor, how do you think education plays an important role in seeing the industry thrive and grow for years to come?
Really, really great question. Continuing education is, and I'm really glad that you use that term,
Mm-hmm.
because education never ends, right?
Yep.
I have so much more to learn. And when students finish their college degrees, they're so good about, okay, now's the next step of the
Mm-hmm.
on the job training or
Yeah.
the next internship or something like that. So I don't think it's unique to the horse industry that continuing education is a part of our industry, but it is
Hmm.
certainly something that I enjoy seeing how prevalent it is. There's
Hmm.
things like this year for the first time, I got to go to the AQHA convention.
Hmm.
And to see those standing committee meetings, they had a really cool professional horsemen's like section that they started off talking about mental health. And that's something I've not really been educated in before.
Yeah.
And they brought in a professional in that field. They brought in a counselor and had a panel, and that was really cool. So continuing education is really important, and also recognizing where you get that continuing education. There's things like breed or discipline associations, one-on-one interactions with professionals or panels with members. Then there's academic societies as well that have conferences. So we have the Equine Science Society.
Hmm.
There's also the Animal Science Society, in other disciplines. There's the Dairy Science Society. So, within animal science, there are many different disciplines that continuing education can be found
Hmm.
through conferences. And in some of those conferences, there are going to be things that can seem kind of overwhelming, and even to me too. Like there might be a repro section that if I go sit down and listen to a lecture on, I don't quite understand the methods, and maybe I
Hmm.
haven't done as much with that. But then later in the day, there might be a panel that is very industry heavy. So and often many of these, you can go in person and attend as an industry member or as a scientist or as a student.
Hmm.
There's often student rates, and a lot of universities do a good job of providing funds to get students to these conferences as an attendee or
Hmm.
even presenting your own research, which is wonderful to see.
Yeah.
A lot of these conferences have virtual attendance options. Is something that COVID certainly made more accessible. So you can attend a conference and
Hmm.
listen to new research methods or listen to reports on what's going on in the horse industry from the comfort of your home. Even another kind of virtual type of step is journal articles are often accessible. There is a fee that the publishers pay. I actually just finished up a publication this morning and submitted it and kind of evaluated some of those open access fees that as a author I can say, this work is very important to industry,
Hmm.
and the authors pay upfront through support from grants and institutions to have that journal article be open access so anybody can access it. There are a lot of really great reviews out there that are written that can be accessible by the industry.
Hmm.
And programs like ours and many other programs do an amazing job of making popular press kind of connections or, something like a Facebook post
Yeah.
about current industry research that they're doing. So I encourage folks to not feel like science isn't accessible to them.
Hmm.
A really simple search engine that I use every single day is
Hmm.
Google Scholar.
Hmm.
And, type in something that you're interested in. If you have a mare that is in her third trimester and you're interested in, some of the different feeding regimens that have been evaluated, or
Hmm.
if you're interested in saddle fit or something like, just whatever those personal interests are,
Hmm.
go to Google Scholar and type those things in, and there may be plenty of open access journals that are available to you. And if there's something that's not open access, usually the local library has access,
Yeah.
or if there's an institution that you're close with, they can get access to you. So it's something that we don't normally think about to say, like, oh, go read. Like, that's kind of
Yeah.
boring. But there are some really great abstracts and summaries that you can spend 2 to 3 minutes just kind of taking a look at some of the things that are going on in research just out of
Yeah.
curiosity.
Yeah.
And I do say with continuing education, it's important that we also evaluate, and this is something that I need to make sure that I do myself too, the quality and the source of that continuing education.
Hmm.
Something like journal articles, we work with students that when they do like a research report or research
Hmm.
project, that they practice finding peer-reviewed journal articles.
Hmm.
The peer review process, whew, it is intensive sometimes.
Yeah.
And when a author submits a journal article, it goes to that journal, for example, the Journal of Equine Veterinary Science.
Hmm.
And that editor determines kind of what section it should go to. And it goes through maybe anywhere from like 1 to 3 reviewers, and those reviewers are anonymous. And they read that journal article and they say, here are the suggested revisions. Sometimes the revisions are you need more support for your
Hmm.
methods, or you need to do something different with your statistics, or sometimes the revisions are just some wording things to make things a little bit more understandable. But then this process is also there for individuals to look at the methods and say, the claims that they make are not supported by the results, or the methods done here do not align with what should be done in the industry, and things that are not high quality research, they can be rejected, or they
Yeah.
can be sent back to the authors to say we'd like you to rewrite this, or every once in a while you get one and it's like, oh man, the reviewers loved it. That feels pretty cool. So there's these checks and balances that are there in journal publishing, and that's why peer review is important to make sure, because I could, out of pocket, publish a book that
Hmm.
is Alyssa Logan's ideas in the horse industry. And some of
Hmm.
them might not be very good. So it's important to consider, thinking about peer review if you're going to take a look at journal articles,
Yeah.
and that's kind of a fun process in some of our research methods courses that we teach.
Awesome. Awesome. I love that so much. So this next question, probably could be a whole other episode on its own. But as a judge and a judging coach, you work with a team and you've attended a lot of shows and competed yourself. Um, I thought you would be great to discuss something that I've been thinking about recently and something that I've always loved and been very passionate about my whole life, as my parents raised me this way, is sportsmanship. I believe that the basis of sportsmanship doesn't stop with shaking the winner's hand or being a gracious loser. It's having respect for everyone from the show management, judges, competitors, and I think in today's show industry, where do you see sportsmanship? And do you think it is something that people sometimes can forget about when they get caught up in the thrill of winning and competition?
I really love that you brought this up. Again, you've come up with some great questions. And you absolutely, acknowledge with sportsmanship kind of that win humbly and lose graciously. And
Mm-hmm.
that kind of is, kind of some low-hanging fruit in terms of sportsmanship, but that's important,
Mm-hmm.
that when you win, you're thankful. And when you lose, you're also thankful.
Yes.
And sometimes I think it's easy to forget about sportsmanship in this sport where a lot of times you are a sole competitor.
Mm-hmm.
Even on these judging teams, we compete as a team and we get results and awards as a team. But when the students walk into the contest, they're alone. They can't
Mm-hmm.
talk to each other. They cannot wear university identifying clothing anywhere.
Right.
They're alone. It's them and their rule book and the horse that they're judging, and it's up to them to get it right. But at the end of the day, we're still a team.
Mm-hmm.
And then when you go into the arena, certainly there's things like team penning and roping that you see a physical team.
Mm-hmm.
But very often, right, you're standing your halter horse on your own, or you're
Yeah.
loping your circles on your own. But we can't forget that as a team, our horse is our teammate. So
Yes.
sportsmanship can look a lot like care of the horse and respect for the horse. I see a lot of associations doing some really good things with bringing the respect and care of the horse to the forefront. So something that I see as the sportsman is the individual that, before they even consider going to dinner for themselves,
Mm-hmm.
their horses' stalls are cleaned, or their
Right.
horses are turned out for the day, and the barn aisle is swept. And that individual that puts the horse at the epitome of care, that also looks like sportsmanship.
Mm-hmm.
But sportsmanship can also look like training that new apprentice,
Mm-hmm.
or giving, someone that rides in your lesson barn a high five after
Yeah.
a good run. And not just the easy stuff of, oh, hey, they won, good job, but oh my gosh, you've been working on your left to right lead change
Mm-hmm.
and you got such a good lead change there.
Yes.
Kind of, that active listening and knowing what your peers,
Mm-hmm.
as fellow trainers or your peers as fellow amateurs or as fellow colt breakers are going through and, checking in on each other because it's a tough life. Even if
Yeah.
we chose to do it, it's physically demanding. It's been, over 90 across most of the country the past week or so, and we're going
Mm-hmm.
into more of it. And it's tough. And when the
Mm-hmm.
going gets tough, not just focusing on oneself and isolating oneself,
Yeah.
but being willing to be a good teammate to the horses and to those around you is certainly what sportsmanship can look like. Um, it is really cool when we do get to see equestrian sports being a very clear team sports and the collegiate equestrian events. And then there's,
Mm-hmm.
the Olympics are coming up this
Yeah.
year and the
Yeah.
times when there's the World Equestrian Games. And it is, I think my heart swells a little bit and you get the, that big smile when you see horsemen helping horsemen and
Yes.
being teammates and the high fives and the ear rubs for the horses. That certainly is cool to see. Um, a lot of associations and even specific shows, they do some really cool things like sportsmanship awards.
Mm-hmm.
And I see very clearly that sportsmanship award is often voted on by peers.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not just, oh, so and so didn't get to show today and they're being a good sport about it. But heck, so and so may have won their class, and folks don't even know because they're so busy helping others and taking
Mm-hmm.
care of their horse, and they're out there being a good representation of our industry. So that, sportsmanship, as you said, can be more than, and we certainly want to expect this of the win humbly and lose
Yeah.
graciously,
Yeah.
but it can be more of that. It's what you
Yes.
do outside of the arena with your horse and with your peers too.
Yeah, exactly, exactly. Because I compete in ranch sorting, and
Yeah.
the the cow is the most humbling animal I have
Oh
learned.
my goodness, yes.
Because you could be having the best day sorting, and just that one cow gets by you and no times you, and everyone understands that. And so, like, we're a competitive sport. Don't get me wrong, we're very competitive. But when we're outside the ring, we're, even if it's the short go and it's the top 10, everyone's cheering everyone on and everyone's like helping each other out. And that's something I've always loved about this branch sorting community, is how much we cheer each other on and support each other and help each other out. And we're kind of a
Yes.
family, even though we're have thousands and thousands of members at this point, but we're always there for each other. And I agree with you that that's exactly what sportsmanship should be. And um, just help being there for each other and respecting each other and being a teammate to the horse and others, like you said. So
Absolutely. Yeah,
yeah.
I mean sometimes it's humbling, to not make a finals you thought that you were gonna make.
Yeah.
But to be able to go and support your friends and
Mm-hmm.
watch the finals and also learn from it too.
Yes. Yeah.
Or something in my world is, or in the academic world, is grants that we have to submit grants for research. And
Mm-hmm.
grants don't have a super high acceptance rate. There's a
Mm-hmm.
lot of individuals and institutions applying for grants. And in grad school, I had a lot of yeses to grants
Mm-hmm.
because I had a really great advisor and team behind me to help me write those grants.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not always going to be that way. There have been plenty of no's to grants
Right.
as I've been on my own as a professor. And it's tough to be like, oh man, I thought that I was
Yeah.
gonna get it. But then to be able to have those peers around you that come and say, what, how can we help you?
Yeah.
Or what questions do you have? That kind of teamwork atmosphere from people that you're actually competing against,
Yeah.
and realizing that, you're kind of the only person you're competing against. There's
Yeah.
people around you that are there to work with you, and in whatever sector of the industry you're at is important.
Yeah. And then when you brought up making finals like that, that also brought up another part of sportsmanship to me, is mentorship.
Oh
Mentorship.
my gosh, yeah.
And I watch the Youth World and the World Show live feed all the time, and I see these kids that they made the finals, but they were just a finalist, and they kind of don't look the happiest. And I'm like, there's a little kid watching you right now that would love that finalist ribbon, so you better smile when you get
Sure.
it. Like, so I just,
Mentorship is such a good
yes,
point.
yeah, because you made the finals when there's hundreds of other kids who would dream to be in Oklahoma City at Youth World and would love to have that ribbon. So it's also, like we said, being a gracious loser and a gracious finalist or whatever it is. But yeah. All right. So we have talked about so much today, and I've loved every minute of it. But is there any topic in the industry that we didn't cover that you feel passionate about, that you feel people don't know much about, or you just want to share?
I mean, Abby, you did such a good job creating these questions. I feel like we've talked about many different things today, and I mean, you really did your research here on things that the industry wants. So I think it's awesome. Um, I mean, I don't know if there's anything else that folks would be interested in. I think I'd say something that's helped me in
Mm-hmm.
any part of what I'm doing, whether
Mm-hmm.
it's teaching or working a horse. And this was actually advice given to me by my PhD advisor is staying current. And yes, that does mean staying current in the industry. And like you said, watch the events, watch the
Mm-hmm.
world show,
Mm-hmm.
in the horse industry, have an idea of who won the Kentucky Derby.
Yeah.
But actually stay, acknowledging, current events in the
Mm-hmm.
world. It will, one, it's humbling to realize that
Mm-hmm.
there's a world outside of the horse industry, but we can certainly learn things from the current events. I think it's respectable to be able to look up outside of our world, and it makes it easier to look back into the horse industry too. And along with kind of staying current, is communication.
Mm-hmm.
Wherever you are in your career, whether you're just starting it
Yeah.
or mentoring individuals, um, responding to phone calls or emails. I guess I don't get physical mail too often, but whatever that form of communication is important. It's kind of going back to that sportsmanship. It's a respectful thing to do,
Mm-hmm.
even to call someone back and say, no, I'm sorry, I can't judge for you that day, but I know a few people that are available, or someone that's wanting to look at a horse or whatever it is, but being able to communicate effectively and efficiently, that certainly will benefit the horse industry. I
Mm-hmm.
think that as an industry, we could do a little bit better in communication. I know we just want to ride,
Yep.
and oftentimes it's hard to actually communicate because most of the places that we're at don't have service.
Right.
But it's going to help with the accessibility thing and making the horse industry accessible to individuals that are trying to gain access to it.
Great. Great. I love that. So, one more question before we get into the rapid fire questions. And this is something I started asking only a few episodes ago, but I'm going to keep doing it. What does it mean to you to be an educated cowgirl?
I'm very appreciative and honored. Coming from a kid that looked to horses on the side of the road, from their car seat as something really cool, look, mom, horsies. And I was like 9 or 10 the first time I went to a rodeo, and I really wanted to have a cowboy hat, and we couldn't find one, and eventually found a straw hat at Tractor Supply, and um, one to have somebody call me an educated cowgirl. It is very kind, and
Mm-hmm.
it means the world to me. I'm honored just to be a part of this industry because I've
Mm-hmm.
been on the outside looking in of this industry when I was much younger and
Mm-hmm.
desired to be a part of this industry, and to be able to work with students and to work with horses every day of my life. It's hard work. It is.
Mm-hmm.
There are many long hours. There was a time when I recorded how many hours a week I work, and I stopped doing that. It was a lot of them, and
Yeah.
I'm okay with that. But I'm so thankful to get to be a part of this industry and work with folks every day.
Great. So great. All right. So, we're going to end the interview with some fun rapid fire questions.
Oh
All right.
boy.
All right. So, if you could wake up tomorrow with any superpower, what would it be?
Ooh, um, goodness. Some kind of fast transportation thing, whether it's flight or teleportation. I think that would be really great. Get all over the country quickly and
Yeah.
get to quickly and go to judging gigs quickly. That would be pretty cool.
Nice, nice. All right. What is your biggest horse ick?
Ooh, you might have to cut out a little bit of thinking time on this one. Like something that like grosses me out about horses.
It could be that, or it could just be something that people do in the industry that bothers you.
Um, I guess not just horses, but folks that might not be willing to learn. That's kind of a hard one.
They feel stuck in their ways, kind of.
Yeah, I just want, if you're stuck, there's people around there to help you.
Mm-hmm.
So just I guess if folks that
Or-
might not be willing to ask for help.
Yeah, or they're closed-minded. Okay. So besides horse shows, what is your favorite part about summer?
Ooh, that's a good one. Okay, so definitely horse shows.
Yeah.
For me, my schedule allows me to get a lot of big projects done in the summer. So some research or being able to do some more like youth events.
Fun, fun. All right. Would you rather be able to speak every language in the world or be able to talk to animals?
Oh gosh, talk to animals would be so cool.
All right, Dr. Doolittle. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. If you could travel back in time, what period would you go to?
Ooh. Um, hmm. I think that like early American settling period, like the 1500s time frame to kind of see those early relationships with horses in North America. That would be cool to be a fly on the wall to that.
Awesome, awesome, great. All right, Alyssa, this has been so much fun, so interesting and fascinating. I love hearing about your story and your passion for everything. Thank you so much again for coming on today. For those that are interested in finding you on social media or through email, how can they follow you or get a
Sure
hold of
thing.
you?
On Facebook, I am Alyssa Logan, ALYSSALOGAN. My email is alyssa.logan@mtsu.edu. On Instagram, which I don't know if folks use that too much or not, but I'm Liss Logan, LYSS Logan. And I think that's all the things they can find me on.
All right, this has been so great. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Abby.
Thank you so much for joining me for this episode of the Educated Cowgirl podcast. I hope you enjoyed it, learned something new, and will come back for more. But for now, stay blessed and ride on, cowgirls.